So welcome to the podcast, The Gift to
Thank you.
Shift. You look fantastic, just like you did some odd 15 years ago, which is the last
Oh,
time that I actually saw you. Can you
yes.
believe that? It's been so
Yeah.
long.
And even that meeting was very, very much so meant to be.
That's right. And
It
it's
happened so
also
organically.
I know. And it was so great to be able to connect and us to keep in touch.
Yeah.
Which is really key. How are you?
I'm well. I am trying to figure out how to balance peace of mind and everything else that's going on
Yeah.
and, keep my joy because,
Amen.
lately things have been, or have the ability to suck the life out of us. So I've been trying to just hold on to what keeps me happy and at peace.
Yeah. So you live in Atlanta.
I'm in Atlanta now.
When we first connected and we first spoke, it was in the
Hmm.
midst of the racial division that has
Yeah.
been brought to life here
Yeah.
in our country. It's always been here, but I think it's
Yeah.
on the front page, so to speak, now,
Right.
as opposed to it being, not hidden,
Hmm.
but disguised. And
Sure.
so we spoke about that a little bit. And then we spoke
Yeah.
about kind of this transition of where you are at in regards to your mom
Yeah.
and how
Huge
pivotal that
transition.
was, that that was for you as as obviously her child, but also
Hmm.
from the perspective of moving, relocating. And so tell me, where are you with that process of
You know,
grief?
I'm still moving with it. I'm still experiencing it. And it's interesting. I went to a conference a couple years
Hmm.
ago, and Dr. Caroline Leaf was there. And she mentioned how, you don't just get over grief. Grief is
Hmm.
not something you can get rid of, but it's something you manage. And that was profound for me because, I had, learned about the different stages of grief when I first, when my mother first passed away. And then, here I am 4 years later. Some days I still wake up sad or angry. And it's like, what is, where is this coming from? But now I understand it's something I manage. It's something that I'm constantly aware of. It's something I
Hmm.
can't just get rid of, but I can manage it and I can allow myself to go through the feelings and the emotions and then understand that, I still have peace in the end. Her life,
Mm.
I can still celebrate her life and everything that she stood for and how she raised my siblings and I. And even in those sad moments, I can still experience that and go through those emotions because I can share with someone else who's gone through what I've gone through and let them know it's okay. You can wake up tomorrow and continue on with your life and not lose the memory of your loved one, what they meant to you, or, what they stood for.
And do you feel that that is now a new Kim? When you add that, right? Because you just said, now I have learned to manage it. So, from what I'm gathering, correct me if I'm wrong, is that
Uh-huh.
it has now become a part of who you are? Or is it something
Yeah.
outside of you?
It's a part of who I am.
Hmm.
I remember some years ago, just toying with the thought, oh my God, if my mom ever passed away, if my dad ever passed away, what would I do? I would lose my mind. And when, it was coming to those final stages, the last few days of her life, I was coming to terms with it, but it was like I was also gaining this sense of strength, right? Like
Mm.
she knew that she was sick, but she didn't want us as her children to go crazy or
Hmm.
become so overcome with sadness that we couldn't function, we couldn't continue to work on our goals and the things that we expressed that we wanted to do. So that stuck with me. And it's like, this is happening, but I can't forget who I am and who God has created me to be and what He's given me to do. So essentially, it was like it's like I gained some extra strength along with this loss, and now I'm moving forward in life with a different perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. I've had my share of grief. I believe that wholeheartedly, that there is another force
Yeah.
that comes forth. And it gives you the ability to be able to persevere, but it
Mm.
also shows you on how deep your well is. How,
Yes.
right? I mean, because sometimes I hit my toe and I'm like, I don't mean to be facetious about the situation, but I'm
Sure.
just saying that we
Yeah.
are, as humans, just thinking that we can't handle most of the stuff that we can.
And we have no
And
idea.
and we have no idea. So when it's placed upon your lap and it's something you have to carry, or that you have, you're placed in this situation, then you
Yeah.
realize, oh my gosh, look at the depth of
Yeah.
the wholeness of who I am as a person.
Mm,
And so did you feel like that gave you, you said you said that it was almost like the strength that you had. Where do
yeah.
you feel that that came from? Do you feel like it was, something that came from your spirituality? Do you feel like that's something that you had, like, mentally strong? Like, where do you feel that came from?
First, I believe it came from God, and I
Mhm.
think it's always been in me, something he's always put in me, but I believe that he equipped me for
Mhm.
that time. And even now, to move on, I think he was able to just kind of jump in there and provide me with that extra strength I needed. I also think there was some experiences that I was dealing with in my life. I was just finishing up a really stressful work position in New York City. Love the job, love the company, but the workload was very stressful. And this was literally leading up, months leading up to my mom passing away. And I mean, I had projects on top of projects. I was, I had certain demands and things that were I was responsible for. And it was like, this is crazy, and in fast paced New York, trying to keep up.
Sure.
And I remember when I had to leave for some time, I felt stressed leaving the job, but I knew I needed to get a break. But it's like, as soon as I left the position for a short time, I had to care for my mom. And as things were happening, it was almost like I've been here before. So it's almost like
Mhm.
that, being in New York, having this, these responsibilities and this role at work, it was almost like it was preparing me in a way
Mhm.
for, okay, I'm getting ready to face my mom being ill for like the first time in her life, and talking with doctors and making decisions on the fly, and the
Mhm.
weight of dealing with not knowing what's going to happen, but I have to step up as a leader, along with my siblings, and make decisions. So it was like life was preparing me in a sense, because even after I came out on the other side of her passing, I'm like, whoa, it was
Wow.
like I was prepared for it in a sense. You know what I mean? And not saying that I was superwoman, but
Sure.
I gained this extra strength through my life experiences to handle that.
I'm so happy that you said, that at first it seemed like it was all God, which it all is, right? I mean,
Oh yeah.
at the end of the day, it all is. But that you can be, what I find so refreshing is that you can also see you've become so aware
Mm,
of that piece of it, which is life has always been preparing me for this, right? Because I think
sure.
that when you're in the midst of it all, it's like, I can't deal with this. I don't know what's going to happen. This is so overwhelming for me. There's so much going on. But that you also acknowledge the fact that life, that position in that town in New York City, in that role, has also prepared you for difficult situations. And
Yeah.
so the tools that you've gained in that part of your life, obviously, the experience of losing your mom is so devastating, but for you to be able to be that aware that that situation that you had prior has helped you
Mm,
so much in your life to be able to deal with a situation like that, that we can essentially pull from things and experiences.
we
They don't
can.
have to be the same, right?
They
Would you
don't.
agree? They don't it's not like you've had to had lost another family member or parent in order to experience what it needs to be able to deal with it. You
Yeah.
can look outside of that experience and say, what other experience in my life has prepared me to be able to deal with some of the things that I'm going through right now?
I think that's so important. And I think that's why, even at this age that I'm at in life right now, I'm starting to realize that more and more. If we could just look at things from a different lens, any situation in our lives, whether it's relational, within our families, at work, in our own personal goals, in the grocery store with, a stranger, if we can look at, most times it's negative situations or any situation, and pull from it the lessons,
Mm,
we would learn so much about ourselves. We would take moments to grow, and take in those
Mhm.
little nuggets. But if we're always looking at things as negative, or why did that have to happen? Why me? Or this
Mhm.
always happens, those types of things that we sometimes tell ourselves, we're missing something. We're missing a lesson. We're missing a chance to grow. We're missing a chance to even see deep within ourselves that we have the strength, we have the know-how, and we can learn from these situations in our lives.
All the times that I coach and train and mentor women in business for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
18 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you are absolutely right when it comes down to perspective. It's a shift in the way that you think and how you process the information that allows you. It's not how you carry, it's not what you carry, it's how you carry it. Lena
Mm.
Horne has a great quote. My girlfriend on What the Quote podcast just had that, and I so remember
Yeah.
it now. It's not, I'm misquoting it, but essentially, it's not what you're carrying, it's how you are carrying it, right? Because we
Mm.
each have our own load to carry. And
We
so
do.
if the perspective is shifted, and that's why I did this podcast, because it's so clear to me that
Mm-hmm.
we where we're at right now within our country and the state of our world, it
Yeah.
can become so polarizing that if you cannot shift your perspective to be able to see another way, another avenue,
Absolutely.
another mentality, that we're going to be stuck in something that should be really simple for us to get over. Like, if we're all on the same, if we're all for the same thing, humanity, if we're all for taking
Yeah.
care of each other, there should be that's a tool to be able to do that. Would you say that it's a tool to be able to shift? Or
I
do you
believe
think
that.
that it's just something that just comes about? Is it like something that you learn as a kid? Were you in sports? Were you doing something that allowed you to push through and to because people are like, well, people who are
Hmm.
in sports, or people who have had this upbringing, or they lived here, or they did that, or
Yeah.
they had both parents, what do you think added to that openness? Because oftentimes it's openness to even have the conversation about
Yeah.
shifting, about perspective.
Sure.
People are so stuck bent on what it is that they believe,
Yeah.
right? You've seen this, I'm sure,
Sure.
within your friends and your circle.
Sure.
People thinking about different, from a political perspective, from whatever else, from a race perspective. People are just
Yeah.
really focused on one thing and they're not willing to pivot. So where do
Mm.
you think that comes from?
That's a great question. I think everyone at some stage in their lives comes to this point or has this experience that is calling them to ding, just look at it from their perspective or from this perspective, and we have a choice whether or not we'll be open to that. I mean, I think, I don't know how young, but maybe from a young age all the way to those who are much older and mature than us, that may be set in their ways. We will all have a moment in our lives that will call us to think differently, see what's happening from someone else's perspective, or try it a different way, and we have a choice on whether or not we'll be open to that. And I think sometimes many of us may go through these cycles and seasons of repeating the same type of situations, or when I like I said earlier, oh, this always happens to me, or why do I always find myself in this situation? And perhaps it's that life lesson that's saying, hey Kim, perhaps you need to shift your thinking, or perhaps you need to try it this way, or perhaps you need to take down your guard,
Hmm.
shake the fear, and just listen, right?
Hmm.
Just hear that other perspective, or see this other way. You don't have to agree just yet, but just be open to seeing it. And I think that's the first step, and perhaps changing one's mindset, or being open to change in any form.
And I agree with you when you say that. I also do think that in
Hmm.
addition to that, there is a hearing, which is different than a listening. And so,
Mm, yeah.
right, we can oftentimes hear, like, oh, I don't think that's a good idea. But do we listen? You
Yeah.
know? And so we can get to a place, and oftentimes, doing coaching and supporting women,
Hmm.
predominantly in, you know, uh, being entrepreneurs, and the emotional and the mental shifting that needs to happen there,
Right.
that there is a part of you that has to be willing to even listen.
Yeah.
right? Or to even hear and then listen and then act upon. So people are like, action creates motivation. If I just get myself into action, then I can do this, I can do that, or I can shift, I can pivot. If I, go and I, get into a massive exercise program, then everything will be fixed. Or
Right.
I mean, I'm deviating off of just a bit, but I just want it to be very clear that what I hear you saying is that there needs to be a willingness. I'm not sure there are many people who are willing to do that. There,
You're
and
right.
so what's your experience with that whole willingness part of doing things that are uncomfortable, or listening, or going into situations that are uncomfortable, like the death of a parent, and being
Yeah.
willing to look at it differently?
I think sometimes individuals or people are so afraid of being hurt again, or
Mm,
are
that's a good point.
have come
Yep.
from maybe this bloodline, or
Mm,
this similar mentality or mindset through family or friends, that it has to be this way
right.
because remember when, or because it always happens like this. And because we're so stuck in our past or all
Mm.
we know, it's too frightening to move away from that, or we couldn't see any other way because this is how it's always been. So I think sometimes if we don't have the skills and tools to heal from our past, or learn from our past, or be open to a new way, we can be so stuck, like I said, wrapped up in fear or one particular mindset of this is how it is, because we haven't healed, or we haven't even taken the time to say, why is that? Why do we do that? Why do we think like that? Or why have we continued to repeat that cycle? So I think it's those missing tools to kind of learn from our pasts.
Girl, if you're listening to this podcast, I am shaking my head. I'm just like waiting to talk because Kim is laying it out. I mean, she is coming with the big guns. I love it because this is going deep fast. This is what I love, because it
Mhm.
essentially is that we do not come here by ourselves. We
Mm-mm.
are here with so much of our generation. I've said
Yeah.
that each of these girls carry their own stories.
And
They
they're
carry,
cute too.
thank you so much. But it took a long time to get used to this. It took a long time to welcome this. It took a long time to be like, you know what? I'm totally in love with every single part of me. And so there is
Mm.
a generational healing that needs to occur.
Yeah.
And that we even need to acknowledge that generational impact, because
Yeah.
we live in a society that says it's just about me. I'm in control of my situation, of my actions. I'm in control of everything that happens. And that is true. But there is another piece of it, which I
Yeah.
think is so big, that
Mhm.
we tend to shy away from because it's too painful to look at. And that
Yeah.
is the generational trauma that we have experienced,
Mhm.
not only within our generation, but within previous generations. And
Right.
so a good friend of mine just put something on her social media and said, each parent did what they could with the tools
Mhm.
that they had based on how they were brought up.
Yeah.
And that generation did the same for them. And so, if we can just be a little bit more gentle in the process of
Mhm.
knowing that, you know what, our parents did the best and are doing the best
The
that they
best.
could have done based on the tools that they had. And so, the healing, because my call to action is to be able to, I believe that joy, when you opened up the podcast with joy, you use that word.
Mhm.
Joy for me is a word that I use as a force of revolution, so to speak.
Mm.
It's for me,
Yeah.
it's part of the revolution for me to be joyful. And my part in this revolution is to be able to serve in a way that opens up freedom and healing. And
Mm.
so this for me is really where I find that kind of, you know, deliciousness of
Yes.
what it takes to really heal, because we start off the conversation with death or transition, and then we move into generations, because now your mom would be considered your ancestor and your
Yeah.
generation, right? And so
Yeah.
the healing can start at a different level now with you and the next
Sure.
generation. But
Yeah.
so when you talk about generational trauma, so to speak. I
Mhm.
use the word trauma, but generations of what it is that they needed and the tools and what we carry over. How does that show up in a way that you can identify? Like, how did you even know that?
Hmm. I think so. I a lot of my friends and family will tell you that I am an old soul,
Yeah, I
and
can
since I
tell.
was
I
a
can
little girl,
tell. I was like, wow, I didn't know we were going to be talking about this today. This is good, juicy stuff.
taking it deep.
Let's
But
go.
I found myself quite often gleaning from and sitting underneath, and I was raised in a Pentecostal church. So I would sit with the mothers of the church or with my
Mm,
grandmother.
mm-hmm.
Or even if we, my mom and dad had a lot of friends, so and they were, a lot of them were older. So I would, take time to sit with them, and just listen and learn. And I think for me, I've always been intuitive and I've always been curious. So I think for me, at a young age, listening and learning things. And as I've gotten older, loving to read and just learn new things, I think I just start to put two and two together, and having this openness within myself to learn more and want to do better as a person. I think it starts to open those doors, and God starts to answer certain questions that I've had. And then I have, again, a choice to make about whether or not I'll be open, whether or not I want to, act differently or make a different choice or go a different way for good, for better. So I think for me, that those times spent gave me like an inside view of what, that generation was going through back then.
That's
And
right.
then, how they viewed, my generation, the
Mm-hmm.
generation to come. But now I'm kind of like in between. Like I'm in,
Mm,
where I am now. I've drawn from them, and now I see, my cousins and those that are younger than me. I can see where their generation is headed. Now it's like, okay, wow, everything's kind of coming together. So that's given me an interesting position in life to kind of marry the two, and maybe at some point be able to speak on or help or share to maybe bring the generations together, or help one, learn from the other. I can kind of be that cool middle woman, if you will.
of course. Of course. Yes. That middle woman is the woman that carries and has taken the wisdom that she's known and that she has gained over the first, you know, decades of her life.
Yeah.
And that's when the transition happens of wisdom and a wise woman and an, and an elder, to be able to do
Yeah.
that. It's funny that you bring that up for church and kind of how the elders were there and you sat with
Mhm.
your grandmothers and you learned so much. And I wonder how much of that is still happening. I wonder how much of that we're seeing in
Yeah.
communities as much,
Mm.
because everything has transitioned differently. Before you would have your your great grandmothers and your grandmothers in the house until
Yeah.
very old. They would die at home. um
Hmm.
People, there's another transition and a way of life that's happening now that we we have a different way of caring for those who are aging. And
Yeah.
so do we get the nuggets that we really need for our humanity to be able to be gentle in the process of growing and learning? And oftentimes you see it in the movies, or you remember the warmth or the smell or the food.
Yeah.
All that stuff is just, that's so good for the soul. How many times are we really doing that in our community? Have we isolated
Yes.
ourselves so much, even within our families? We love our families. I know I love my family dearly,
Hmm.
but I don't see them as much as I really wanted to, or that I
Hmm.
really want to in this time. Obviously, because of the pandemic. Let me just date this podcast. We're
Yeah.
here in the midst of the 2020 pandemic, which will go down in the history books. And we're quarantined, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going on with that. But apart from that, how are we really connecting with those
Right.
people that are really important to us?
Yeah. And I've been thinking about that quite a bit. I recently heard of another, I would say I would call her a mentor, that I met when I was in Boston, and she passed away recently. And I had been meaning for a few months now to call her and her husband to catch up. And
Mm,
I said, man, I did it. dropped the ball on that. I didn't
Yep.
check in just to say, hey. And I just started thinking about the many conversations I had with them that were so uplifting, so encouraging, and just so practical, if you will. Them just sharing stories about, their lives as a young couple and things that they did and how God blessed them to, stay strong and be successful. And I remember those stories. And so for me, it was just that reminder. I've got to start making a point to call, to check in, to hear someone's voice, right? To hear their stories, to hear hear them share memories,
Right.
and I'm directing that towards, my elders, but with anyone really.
Right. And, now that we're in this pandemic and everybody's Zooming and
Yeah.
connecting via Skype, there are some people who are like, I feel more connected to you now than I did before because we are, right? I mean, I know that for me, I tend to now, I'm duoing my aunts, all the time. The
Nice.
kids are on,
Right.
they're connecting with them because I'm like, I need a break. I got these two kids and they're just like, can we see? Yeah, so usually it would be like, okay, let's, go over to your godparents' house or, let's connect with my cousins or, we're not able to do that as much. But it really, my my hope is that in this
Hmm.
time of stillness,
Yeah.
that we have, semi stillness,
Hmm.
that we can really go deep and really figure out what's important and what our
Yeah.
roots are and where we're going with this and what we're doing as a human race to be able to raise the next generation of children, nieces and nephews and cousins
Hmm.
that can go ahead and count on those tools and those skills to be able to connect so that
Mm.
we can find out and heal up some of that stuff and
Yeah.
yet give them the opportunity to really know where they've come from, what it is that they, you know, what is it that they're about, so to speak, and then
Right.
create that for the next generation. I'm not sure if we can do that with our
Right.
generation.
Yeah, and it's so funny you say that. As you're speaking on those things, I'm like, oh my God, the generation now is moving so fast. Everything is quick, fast, social media, you get your
Mhm.
stories, you can watch things in less than 30 seconds. And but if we would find the time and realize how important it is for us to preserve those
Right.
face-to-face moments, or for those phone calls, or just this, like I said, in that stillness, just to have a nice conversation, right? To
Yeah.
glean from and learn from. We have to remember that's so important and we cannot lose that.
Yeah. And in those times is where you find peace and you find that
For
peace that
sure.
for me, I lost my goddaughter and those are the times I feel her the most,
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear. Mhm.
and so it's important to be able to know that our connection to our ancestors and our the generations that's come before us are in those still moments,
Mhm.
right? It's in that time
For
of
sure.
just tranquility and just gathering everything that we've learned. Like you said in the beginning of the call, like I have assimilated this grief in a
Yeah.
way into me in a way that is now who I am, which makes
Yeah.
me so much more full. Or, for me, from my experience with my goddaughter, makes me so much more intentional about things. It makes me so
Yeah.
much on focused or not listening to the other stuff outside of that and just
Mhm.
kind of going within and saying, this is the direction that I need to move. It
Yeah.
has created more courage in my spirit because of
Mm.
that relationship. And she's no longer here, but it's so important to be able to identify that in the midst of the grief, that
Yeah.
there's also a place of healing and joy, and that's okay.
That is okay. You're right. I can't tell you how many times I have in my own quiet time in the car, at home,
Right.
at my desk at work, I'll hear my mom's laugh or her voice.
Mm,
And there are moments that I'm having a challenging moment where I'm like freaking out, or maybe even close to, giving up on,
mm,
a goal or something. And I just remember those things she used to say to me, be you, you know what I mean? God made you for a specific purpose. Keep striving for what you want to do. It's gonna come, work hard. And it's like immediately I perk up. And she didn't have to be there with me in the room, but essentially she is. And those memories are so strong. And what she told me stays with me, and it just means so much. But I when I can settle myself and be
Mhm.
open to that, it's those reminders that just keeps me going, keeps me strong.
Right. The ability to be able to be aware and to be
Mhm.
willing to be aware, and then to be able to
Yeah.
sit with the feeling, right?
Yeah.
Because once you're in the feeling, you're in the feelings, and then it sometimes it feels like a wave, or it feels like,
Mhm.
for me, it feels like a tightness.
Yeah.
And then to just be able to sit with that and then know that it will pass. That even
Yes.
how long has it been since your mother passed away?
It'll be 4 years this year, 4
It'll
years
be
in
4 years.
February.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and so it doesn't get any, you know, my, goddaughter passing has only been 3 months, but there's no
Okay.
time frame
No.
in the way that we process the grief. There's no
No.
time frame in that. And so the ability to be able to have the tools of changing your perspective, looking at different things in your life that have come up that
Mhm.
you can tap into and pull out so that you can go
Yeah.
ahead and use, to be able
Mhm.
to look at your generations prior to figure out what tools that they can serve and what tools you can leave behind, right?
Yes.
Because in addition to the good ones, there were also some not so great ones. But
Okay.
to be to be to be able, I can't wait to talk to you offline. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
But really, to be able to kind of just check, we'll do a follow up. But really
Yeah.
to just be able to kind of like look at all of that and just
Yeah.
say, this is part of who I am. And part of
Mm.
who I am is me learning to be okay with it all.
And that's true self-growth. That
Hmm.
is a part of it. You know, when you can sit with that and be okay and be aware of it. Know you have some things to work on, or but when you're aware of that and it's okay,
Hmm.
to me, that's a sign of self-growth and maturity because you're super aware.
That's right. And where do you find your joy in, like your daily activity? Like take us, to a place that you find the most joy. Could it be exercise, or where is that? Where do you find your well of strength from?
So now I will say this. I really do believe God has given me a gift of joy, if that makes sense. I just feel like he's naturally made me a joyful person. It doesn't mean I'm like happy all the time and never sad, but I really believe he's given me a gift of joy. And I'm a people person. So I really enjoy meeting new people, when I'm at work, just conversing with other people, hearing about what's going on in their lives, learning from them. People have so many awesome hobbies and things that I never knew of or never dug too much deeper into to learn more about. And so for me, I just enjoy just talking with people and learning from them. And I think
Mm,
for me, just remaining grateful. I'm still, getting on my feet here in Atlanta, trying to, feel my way around, learn the state, learn the city. And but it's like, you know what, I've come a long way in the past couple years. I've gained a lot more knowledge, I've gained a lot more things, and I'm growing. And you know what? That makes me feel good. I'm
mhm,
not in the same place I was in last year, last month. And
mhm,
so for me, if I can keep that perspective, just, I've come a long way. I've made it through. My mom passed away, but I'm still here and I'm okay. Like
mm,
that gives me joy too, because I know tomorrow, I don't know what it holds, but it's going to be okay.
mhm. It
So
sounds
I
like, I'm
mhm.
sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying I think for me that, and even now it's lighting me up because I'm like, yeah,
Yes,
like
I
when I
can
think
see it in your
back,
face. Yeah.
it's like, everything is going to be okay.
Everything is always okay. And
Yeah.
you're right. Everything is going to be okay. And your gift of joy that you feel, like you said, I feel like God has given me that gift. That's such a huge acknowledgement, because that is the talk of a server. That's a talk of a servant, I should say.
Yeah.
Someone who serves that to other people and that can connect. And maybe that's what I was drawn to when you popped up in my social media, even though we hadn't spoken in 15 years. I
Yeah.
said, I just have to call her. And you're probably like, what? It's nice to see you on LinkedIn, but
Right.
there was really something about you that I just thought, oh my gosh, I just really need to connect with her. And I love what you said about
Yeah.
gratitude, the ability to be able to be grateful in the midst of it all. They say, I mean,
Yeah.
you can really, really read any book,
Mhm.
that you any book, and it will say that when you're focused on gratitude and when you're
Yeah.
focused on what you're grateful for,
Mhm.
it shifts everything. So
It
gratitude is a
does.
huge, huge tool. And so before we come to an end, I do want to find out, what are you doing now? What brings you joy, and what are you excited about? I have the nuggets here. I'll share them in your show notes. But if people want to get
Yeah.
in contact with you, tell me more about that, because I love that piece of
Yes.
it.
I'm super excited. So I am still acting and working on building my host platform. Hopefully, we'll be hosting some events in Atlanta as things pick up and as the coronavirus kind of moves along, and we get some understanding on how we can heal from that. But my on my social media, I had been doing some inspirational videos that I paused for a short time, but we'll be starting up again. But I just go through my day, and these topics come to mind, and I want to just start the conversation. I want to hear from you. I want to hear from others on, what do you think about this, on gratitude or rejection, and let's talk about it. And I just, in the past, when I have done those videos, I've noticed, when I go down in the comments, it just, that conversation is rolling and people are throwing this out there and that out there. And it's like, wow, I never thought of that. Or someone will comment, hey, I needed to hear that. And that just excites me, because I think we're missing a lot of those good, deep conversations where we just talk. We just get it out there. We pose the question and we hear from others. And then someone gets the answer they weren't expecting, or they say, oh, that's just what I needed to hear.
That's right. And that's how the shift happens. That's the
Yeah.
gift in it, the gift to shift.
Yeah.
In listening and hearing the perspective of others to maybe say, hey, I never thought about it that way. That's interesting.
Hmm.
Maybe I can look at it that way. I
Right.
believe that in the midst of this new age of phones and technology, that
Uh
we
huh.
are more isolated and we have less conversations. And that's why, for me,
I
podcast was the
agree.
way to go, because it
Yeah.
essentially was a conversation that I was having. And I wanted to make sure that you and I saw each other, and that we
Yeah.
spoke about something that was particularly important for you. So
Hmm.
I'm glad that you brought your mother into this conversation.
Me too.
Thank you
I
so
just
much.
thank you. Thank you so much for that. It keeps her on my mind, and it keeps her just a lot of the things that she said, it just keeps them alive,
That's right.
because she was all about joy and living your best life too.
Well, she definitely is living through you. I can see that and hear that. And I
Thank
so
you.
appreciate your honesty and your openness to talk about a very tough subject.
Mhm.
And I thank you so much.